it's very difficult for those who are not initiated in the language of economics to try and understand what is happening to our economy, and especially that every day we hear pronouncements from the state managers telling us about different economic terminologies. Now, to the citizens, it's very difficult for them to actually understand, to appreciate when they are told the economy is stable, GDP is growing, the projected growth looks good. So when all these economic fundamentals are being, presented or disseminated to the citizens, they don't understand much. And they'll just assume that everything is all right. So I want to make a very practical illustration of how these key indicators of the economy function. And I want to focus on why the bank lending interest rates are so high in our country. 29.12% is too high in a country where the majority of the citizens need to access that capital to grow their businesses. Because the cost of money must be cheap, money must be accessible. And if you're talking about collateral, you need to understand that the very idea or the very business that a Zambian who is enterprising wants to initiate must become the capital. It must become the capital. And there are many other measures that can be actually applied in a country where there's commitment, there's political and commitment to ensure that citizens access the money for the growth of the economy, and also to ensure that people have more money in their pockets. So, the biggest culprit when it comes to interest rates is the government. Banks play a very insignificant role when it comes to the determination of the interest rates. So, I want to focus on what is called the statutory reserve ratio. Statutory reserve ratio. Mark the word statutory, meaning statute. What is a statute? This is an act of parliament. This is by law. A reserve ratio. What is a reserve ratio? A reserve ratio, statutory reserve ratio, is a percentage of the deposits that a bank must reserve with the central bank. So, here I'm using this tray of eggs here. So let's take that here. This is the central bank. Then here, this is the bank. We'll take an example of one bank. So this bank has collected, here I have 10 eggs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. So let's say this is 10 kwacha. The people depositing this one kwacha, 1 kwacha, 1 kwacha. So the bank collects 10 kwacha in terms of the deposits that they have. Okay? Mind you, when the bank collects money, the bank is in business. The bank makes money through lending. They have to lend that money. And there must be an interest. So the bank has no, really strictly speaking, authority to just wake up and create or declare that this so much shall be the interest. Of course, there are many factors that are taken into account. Banks do not operate in a vacuum. Banks operate in accordance with the statutes. There are many acts of parliament that regulate how banks operate. And the regulator is the Bank of Zambia, or central bank in other countries, or reserve bank, as other countries call them. So here's a bank with 10 kwacha. Now, before all the lending, whatever is done, there must be some policy, provision, some policy guidelines from government. So government announces the statutory reserve ratio is set. For instance, the reserve ratio in Zambia is 26%. I'll repeat that. The statutory reserve ratio, which the Bank of Zambia set, is 26%, which is very high. On average, very, very high. When you look at countries that have 5%, 3%, 7%, Now, ours is 26%. So what does this mean? Now, for the sake of this practical example here, let's say it's 40% as the reserve ratio. So it means from this 10 kwacha that the bank has in deposits, 40 kwacha must be reserved. So what's available? You have 6 kwacha. This 4 kwacha is not available for lending out. It's kept. It's with the Reserve Bank, the Central Bank, the Bank of Zambia. So here are the people. They are looking for money, businesses. These are business people. I'm using my garlic here. Garlic. They are looking for money to grow their businesses. Others, they might have a grocery. Somebody has a welding project. Somebody wants to do some farming. Now, so they are queuing up for what? For 6 kwacha. 4 kwacha is no longer available. It's with the government. So now, here is the situation in Zambia. So this side, let's take this side here, is the government. Then the same government goes to the bank to pick the people's deposit. They borrow, let's say 5 kwacha. When government becomes the borrower, they borrow 5 kwacha. How much money is there in the bank? Only one kwacha. So these 4 people must queue up for 1 kwacha. So what happens? 4 people are going for 1 kwacha. So there's demand. Demand goes up. Now remember, the reserve ratio, in this example, we are saying 40%. But there's also, I don't want to focus on it, the policy rate. I don't want to confuse you much. Because the biggest point that you need to understand is the statutory reserve ratio. So there's 1 kwacha. So, meaning the effective interest rate in this case, in our example, would be at least a minimum of 40%, because that's the reserve ratio here. Or when you key in also the policy rate. So, now, because there is now demand, what will the banks do? They will also put some, because there is demand, maybe to be 50% interest rate. Now imagine one of these must take this 1 kwacha. So they take 1 kwacha. The interest rate is 50. Meaning, or even 100%, for instance, because when look, there are many things that go on actually in a business at the end of the day. Because the cost of money, there are many concepts I don't want to go into. There's what we call weighted average cost of business. There's so many things when I'm looking at the cost of running a business. Because banks have employees, banks have technologies, banks have so many things that they are a business, mind you. So they must also sustain operations. Each bank has key driving costs or cost drivers. So they're looking at that also. How can they sustain the operations? So everything is coming also from the deposits that they are taking, because this is the business that they are in. So, from this example, you can see that the biggest culprit is the government. Now, how can the government, which has collected 4 kwacha, being kept at the Reserve Bank, then 5 kwacha, they borrow the money, 5 kwacha, from the same banks. They become the first in the queue. So when economists say, when government borrowing is increased, it crowds out, they crowd out the private sector. So talking about the private sector is not just by word of mouth. You don't talk the people, the private sector. No, which private sector? You are killing the private sector. Such a government, which is doing like this here, is a killer of the private sector. And this is the government that we have. The current government, that's what they have done. They have increased all these, the policy rate is among the highest since independence. The reserve ratio is 26%, which they increased, I think, at the beginning of the year, or towards the end of 2024. They increased by what we said, 9 percentage. From 17%, it went to 26%. So more than a quarter of all the deposits that banks collect are reserved by the Bank of Zambia. That money, you can't access it. The bank can't access it either. You need to understand these things that I'm talking about very clearly. So what happens is that only one is borrowing. Now what happens to these people, including individual families? In the end now, we have now the Tuntemba lenders. They'll come on board. And most of these are foreign owned also, by the way. Most of these companies that are lending to the civil servants, defense and security personnel, among other workers in the private sector. The entire country in terms of the financial sector has been intembanized. Zambia is intembanized. And these are banks. 75% of the banks in Zambia are foreign owned. And what does it mean to the economy? It means that these deposits that we are keeping with these banks, remember, at the end of the day, they are making profits. Those funds are externalized. Go to Nigeria. Nigeria, yes, has its own share of difficulties, but Nigerians have built local banks. And they are taking, because they retain the money right in the economy. If they make the profits, money is retained in Nigeria. South Africa appears to have an urge of, the economies in the region. Why? They have the financial sector, they have local banks there. The majority of which are also here. South African banks. So, in order for a country to have financial sovereignty, we need to put the citizens together. This country has many educated citizens who are experienced. This country needs wisdom and thinking outside the box. We need to begin to think outside the box. How can we get Zambian banks? Look at what happened to Invest Trust, a local bank, being killed by its own government. Why? Because when you have international economic hitmen governing the state, they don't care about this. So what will happen now is that when Zambian businesses can't access cheap capital, cheap money to grow their businesses, foreign companies come who are getting loans from their countries at 1%, 1.5% from their banks. They bring the money from outside. And then you give them tax holidays. And they even take back this same money. They're just coming to use Zambia as a cup. And nothing remains for the people of Zambia. Zambia is being used and dumped. Leaders don't care. Because they're the beneficiaries from these people are coming from outside. Now, how can a government which has done all these which has committed all these in inverted commas, these crimes, because this is a crime to me. Some call it white collar crime. And it's a government now which goes ahead to direct the banks to reduce the interest rates. Banks are not government, they are not government owned. Even if they are government owned, these principles are at play. You have all the money, and then you are saying reduce the interest rate for this one quarter, which has remained in the economy. Does that make sense? Why are we lying to the people? We are lying to ourselves. Leaders are lying to themselves. And it's not good to give motivational speeches to yourselves. The people of Zambia are not interested in motivational speeches. The people of Zambia, what they want is cheap money. The people of Zambia want food. The people of Zambia want more money in their pockets. For them to take their own destinies into their own hands, under God, and deliver for their nation. Very important. Let me repeat this illustration. For this is very important. If you don't understand this, these liars, they will continue to lie because they're expert liars. I said, a reserve ratio is a percentage of the deposits that banks collect, which must be kept, which must be deposited, or must be reserved under the Bank of Zambia. So, in this example, we are saying, if the reserve ratio is 40%, and there is a bank, there are 10 depositors, each has deposited 1 quarter. So it has 10 kwacha. This bank has 10 kwacha. If the reserve ratio is 40%, it means 4 kwacha is taken out from the bank. So the bank has made with 6 kwacha to lend out. The bank can't access this. This is with the central bank, it's the reserve ratio. So meaning these 4, in our example, Zambian entrepreneurs, enterprises or companies, SMEs that want to access money from the banks, they are queuing now for 6 kwacha. But the same government which has collected this money through the reserve bank, they go to borrow from the same banks. That's what happened in Zambia. They go to borrow 5 kwacha. One kwacha is what has remained in the bank. Now, the demand for this money is high because 4 people want to access this money. Government is the biggest borrower. In other words, government has crowded out, it has pushed out the citizens, its own citizens. It's on local businesses. They cannot access this money. There are many Zambian corporations that are doing very fine, of which if they are to get a little capital, they can even grow jobs. It's these companies that must access the capital. Because when the government gets this money, they get this money, and then they spend it. There's profligate spending on things that are not necessary. Unnecessary trips. Apart from that, there are so many abuses for this kind of funds. Especially if this money which government borrows is not invested in growth sectors, or those sectors of the economy that have what we call multiply effects. Especially in agriculture, which has both forward and backward linkages. Look at our agriculture today. It's the most disorganized since independence, right now. Farmers are getting less of the inputs that they must get, the seeds, the fertilizers, none them, and also late delivery. Here, right now, it's a farming season. Farmers have not received, some of them, the inputs that they need. Some of them, they haven't even been paid for last year's produce. How do you expect the economy to survive like that? And as I said, you live one kwacha. Then, let me also explain something. When I'm talking about the GDP, another big one which they use, GDP is growing. What is gross domestic product? It's the total number of goods or services produced in an economy over a year expressed in monetary terms. Now again, back to example. Let's take 10 households and we take these two because each household is an economy. Every household is an economy. So whatever is happening at macro, at the top level, it must reach the micro, it must reach every household. If you are saying there's growth in the economy, that growth must be seen in every individual household. These households, they must feel the impact of that economic growth. They must have more income, disposable income. If they're eating 1 meal per day, they must have 3 meals per day. They must be well off. There's what we call social mobility. Meaning, social mobility entails movement from one class to another, especially the middle class. If you kill the middle class, there's nothing that we're talking about. Once the middle class begins to suffer, to struggle, then you have no economy to sing about. You kill the people, and it's time to go. The majority are in the middle class. So, now when I talk about an economy, so if you are saying total goods produced, now let's take it this way. In fact, I'll remove 2 eggs here. I'll leave 8 here. I'll introduce apples. So these apples are representing multinational corporations that have invested in the copper mines. Then these are Zambians, the 8. So I talk about GDP. So, now let's take what is produced by these 8 Zambians. The population is 8. By these 8 Zambians, what is produced, together with what these mines have produced, let's take it to be 10 kwacha. Now, this is year 1. Year 2, we want to look at the growth. These big ones, these 8, they have no capital, they are condemned to poverty, they're only producing only 1 unit, that's all. Now these are foreign. In year 2, this amount of copper that have extracted. these foreign corporations. Four units. So to an economist, it doesn't matter. They don't look at where the Zambians have done this. All he's looking at is 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. And then how many more? Pam, pam, 4, 12. Or growth is by 20%. Why aren't these Zambians feeling it? Because the ones who have extracted more copper, which they are computing, are these foreign corporations that are running the mines, our mines, taking out our copper. Now, why are we not seeing the benefits of this growth? It's because all these things that they produce, this copper, they are taking it out. It's just remaining in the books that they extracted the 800,000 metric tons. It's just in the books, not what they've extracted. In terms of what is on the money in the economy, there's nothing. And then as a government, it goes to these same people, it's one kwacha, pay as you earn, to run the country. These are just coming to exploit the country. You go to these same already struggling people, families. We are not dealing with the source of the growth of the economy. A sensible government, a patriotic government, must look at the extent to which Zambians are playing a role in the growth of that GDP, the gross national product, in other words, where you look at nationals. How much are those people from Timbers are producing? This must be the interest of the government, the Zambian people. It's common sense, enough is enough. We can't continue on this path. Governments come in, governments go. The people of Zambia are still stagnant. It's not enough to just make pronouncements by mouth. The people of Zambia want money. The people of Zambia want food. Zambians want jobs. Businesses want breathing space. You can't suck life out of every business, out of every household. Money is not in circulation. Because of these wrong policies that you are taking with some people, these instruments are in your hands. Now, if you have economic hitmen, international economic hitmen, their preoccupation is to sing about other countries. That's why they will say, no, so country is praising us. America is praising us. Europe is praising us. IMF is praising us. This country doesn't belong to the IMF. Doesn't belong to the World Bank. Zambia belongs to the people of Zambia. What's happening is it's really annoying. How do you want me to smile about these things? If you are smiling about these things, there's something wrong with you in my view. If there's something wrong with me, I admit. And I would rather therefore remain with that same something wrong. Because I am convinced that this is not the path on which this country must be. I am convinced that this is not the Zambia that my grandmother Chikamaleka dreamt of. This was not a vision. This is not the country that Mngondiso stood for. This is not the Zambia that Nkumbula stood for. Sipalo, they never stood for this kind of country. This is not the Zambia that Kapwepwe dreamt of, that he stood for. This is not the Zambia that we are seeing today. This kind of Zambia was never ever thought of by those who woke up every morning to go and take the bullet for us to birth this republic. There's no one who has more rights to this republic. All Zambians have equal rights and must have equal opportunities. These are fundamentals that must be addressed. And ensure that the people of Zambia receive the benefits of their own resources. The abuses of Zambians by governments for 61 years must stop, must be brought to an end. It's about time that Zambians lived that phrase in the national anthem, proud and free. National pride must be restored. The freedom, that we're proud and free, that freedom must be restored. It's not just freedom in terms of assembly association, financial freedom, financial sovereignty. These are things that must be addressing our minds to. This must be the debate that we must have now. Forget about all these other things. Forget about personalities. This is a debate that all of us, whether invited or not, we must be part of this debate. Register to vote. And for the first time we pray that, shall we take time to listen to each and every person? It's not just a matter of every Jim and Jack waking up, beginning to speak, or insults, which are now like in the political spaces. And somehow, you cannot understand the president. It's like the president, sometimes you can abuse actually the presidents, which is not correct. It's not about the presidency. It's about the country. It's about Zambia. Because sometimes it's true. Our debates can be so personal. Everyone waking up, HH. Stupid nonsense. Stop that thing. HH. You are dreaming HH. You are eating HH. Forget about this kind of smallness. Let's talk about Zambia. Let's talk about the electricity which we do not have. It's not about HH. To a certain extent, HH is right. Let's stop this kind of debate. What I'm saying is right in terms of raising a cry. Though you shouldn't be crying like that, that is what people hate me. There's no hatred. All we are saying is, let's focus on the issues. And such people who are reducing the debate personalities, they must just be ignored, just ignore them. But listen at least to the sources of wisdom. And tap into the wisdom of each and every citizen. Because we have only one Zambia before us. And some of the talks that we are seeing in the political spaces can destroy this country. We need to reject any kind of division coming from both sides of the divide. This is not a European issue. This is not one-sided. It should be wrong. The problem is on both sides of the divide. If you don't accept this reality, then we are living in a fool's paradise. And you are a foolish person, foolish number one. This is the rate we are in. Let's change the debate and begin to look at the alternatives. Let the battle be a battle of ideas for Zambia. And let those that have the instruments of power now listen. If they can't pick those ideas and do good for the country, then it will be justified for all of us to say, please, your good, your best is not good enough for us. Go. And let's have a change of government in 2026. Genuinely. Without any hate speech, without any insults. Thank you.